There's an interview on Boxing Socials channel, which is a great channel. You should go check that out, with Rob Tebbert, and he's interviewing Adam Smith. And Adam Smith is basically he's openly criticising Eddie Hearn and the show that was put on. Now he's not criticising the show in the ways you think. He's not saying this was a terrible show, but he's saying in the build up to this show, he thought it was a weak card. He wasn't too happy with it, and he wanted Joshua Buatsi to headline the card, not Ted Cheeseman. Now he went on to say in that interview that actually he felt the card was actually quite good. I disagree with that. I think it was a very weak card. I think the main event saved it in some ways, but I think it was a very weak card. But I think that this is the first time I've ever really heard Adam Smith, criticising Eddie Hearn. He was even saying, he needs to do better and stuff like that. That's the very first time you've ever really noticed that. And what I'm getting from that is that there's a bit of, unrest probably between Sky and Eddie Hearn. And I think some of that can stem from, the fact that Eddie Hearn has basically scrapped Anthony Joshua's next date, which was set to be at Wembley on April 13th. That's not going to happen now, we know that. And, that was a big money fight for Sky. They would have got, with people to see it in Wembley, they would have got a lot of pay-per-view buys. And if he does if Anthony Joshua does fight Miller in the States, will that do the same numbers? Will people be willing to pay, 20 quid to stay up till 4 a.m? I don't know. Also, I've also noticed, now this is something I picked up back in November when Eddie Hearn done that show in Monte Carlo. And it was basically the way Sky and Eddie Hearn were, I don't want to say coming to blows, but they definitely disagreeing over something. And it was the prospect Daniel Yelusinov. Now, for those who don't know, Daniel Yelusinov is from Kazakhstan. He's an Olympic gold medalist. I believe in the welterweight division he won it. And he's beaten the likes of Josh Taylor and Josh Kelly in the amateurs. Very high-level amateur. Now, Yelusinov is based in the States. He's trained by John David Jackson. And, primarily he's going to be on the zone. And I think that's another reason where this kind of animosity between Sky and Eddie Hearn is coming from. Allegedly. I want to get that out there. I'm not saying that there is animosity. I'm just saying allegedly. Is the zone. Now, I'll get to that now in a sec, but Daniel Yelusinov is primarily going to be in the States. He's going to be on the zone. Now, Yelusinov is a prospect that I want to keep my eye on, but he's definitely not shone as bright as he could have in the pros as he started his career. Now, I think some of that has to do with the fact that he's maybe struggling to adjust to the pro style, and at the end of the day, I think he might need a little bit more work with John David Jackson. He'll get there. You can see there's a good fighter there, but it's just he needs a little bit more work. Now, Sky, in every fight I've seen, they can really come down hard on Yelusinov. Matthew Macklin was going in on him on that Monte Carlo show, saying he can't punch, he's not like this, he's not like that. And one thing I noticed about Sky, they were drumming home Josh Kelly a lot. Despite the fact that Yelusinov beat him, they were really drumming home the fact that, Josh Kelly doesn't do that, Josh Kelly is this, Josh Kelly is that. And, Josh Kelly is a good fighter. But I was kind of, surprised because I'm so used to, matchroom prospects being hyped, overhyped in some instances. I couldn't really understand it. And they interviewed Eddie Hearn after, and Eddie Hearn was, flat out disagreeing, saying, no, Yelusinov is a great prospect. What are they talking about? And it kind of had me wondering, if Yelusinov was British, would Sky be reacting that way? I seriously doubt it. I seriously doubt that he would be getting condemned as much as he is if he was a British fighter, in my opinion. Now, why do I say that? I say that because Sky are looking for their own homegrown talent. They're not looking for fighters on the zone who they can, market in the UK, because them fighters are going to be fighting in the States. The DAZN fighters are all stateside fighters. Eddie Hearn has signed some prospects out of the amateurs to DAZN contracts. They're American. They're, I think some are Ukrainian. So they're all from, Eastern Europe or America. They're not from the UK. So they're not going to be built on matchroom cards. They're not going to be built on next-gen cards over in the UK. So there's not really any stars coming through that can fill the shoes, when AJ moves on, when Dylan White moves on. We've had Tony Bellew retire, David Hay retire, etc. You saw it with Carl Froch when Carl Froch was kind of like the matchroom guy. You could see Anthony Joshua coming through straight away. You knew this guy had some serious potential, some serious pulling power. So Sky were kind of safe in the knowledge they had Anthony Joshua. And, they had guys like James DeGale, they didn't have George Groves, but you know what I mean? Like, they had George Groves on some of them cards. So they had a good kind of foundation to build on back a couple of years ago. Whereas now, who do they really have? They have Joshua Buatsi, very good fighter, and I do think he has pay-per-view potential. You got Josh Kelly. Kelly, I'm not too sure about. I'm still not really, 100% sold on Kelly. He's a very good fighter. He's very talented. He's got some fantastic skills, some fantastic athleticism. But I'll touch on this more in a separate video, which we're going to do about some prospects. So realistically, who does Sky have? At one stage, Sky had Josh Warrington. Now, I don't know why Josh Warrington signed with Frank Warren. I don't know if there was something behind the scene. Maybe Sky didn't feel that he was, pay-per-view worthy. But obviously, he is. He's, pay-per-view now on BT Sport, which is good for him. And Josh Warrington would be someone that maybe Sky should have looked at and thought, maybe we let him slip through our fingertips. There was someone else I was thinking of, and now it's actually name just slips my mind. But Sky really don't have any up-and-comers who you could say are pay-per-view quality. You've got Lawrence Acolli. I don't think the fans have taken to him too kindly, especially in light of his fights with Isaac Chamberlain and Matty Askin, where he just basically held on and grabbed for 10 or 12 rounds. So who does Sky really have? So Eddie Hearn, although he's getting fighters, on these cards, on these next-gen cards, the cards are quite weak. And none of the guys who are coming through, you could really say, have a pay-per-view, future, essentially. Some of them might prove me wrong and might prove others wrong. But who could you really say is a pay-per-view star coming up? And if there's no pay-per-view stars, how are Sky going to get their money? Because, the DAZN have their own fighters. And they're in America, so it's not really going to impact Sky because it's a different company, essentially. So I can see where the animosity between Sky and Eddie Hearn is coming from. Now, I know Eddie Hearn and Sky, as far as I know, have a couple of years left on their contract. And Eddie Hearn is the only promoter who's allowed to work with Sky. So they don't work with the guys like Frank Warren or Mick Hennessy. It's all Eddie Hearn. So what might Sky do? Will Sky be putting pressure on Eddie Hearn to try and get more fighters out? I think maybe that's one of the reasons why we're seeing some of these fighters being matched in 50-50 fights, because Sky want to see, I think, some of their prospects in 50-50 fights. Now, that's good in a sense that we're not seeing journeyman after journeyman, fight prospect after prospect. But at the same time, you see fighters getting moved ahead too quick, like we saw with Lewis Ritson, like we saw with Ted Cheeseman. And, some of them are getting beaten. They're getting beaten bad. So, it really is a double-edged sword, I think. So, those are my thoughts on this. I don't know. It really does seem that Sky and Eddie Hearn are, at odds now at this stage, because it was all well and good when Eddie Hearn was only running Sky shows, only running them in the UK. And, we had a wave of UK talent coming through. Whereas now it's kind of slowing down a bit. And now Eddie Hearn is focusing almost more on the States and more on getting DAZN up and running. Sky maybe, not happy. Maybe they want more airtime. Maybe they want more of their own fighters to come through. That's just what I'm thinking. I could be wrong. Feel free to leave your thoughts down below. Let me know what you think. As I say, these are all just my opinions. This is all my thoughts. I'm not saying that any of this is, happening. So, just bear that in mind. And leave your thoughts below. And again, I will talk to you after.